Well, we are in week 2 of a series. Before we get into that, I hate having microphones. I feel like I'm glued in spots. Molly, it's always amazing to have you back. That's probably one of my favorite covers this year for sure. I love Radiohead. I picked the wrong Sunday to not wear my Radiohead shirt. Creep, that's Creep by Radiohead there. What a fantastic song. Oh, goodness gracious! And then that meditation, Beth, is fantastic. That's what we want to talk about. That's where we're at. We're talking about stories that shape us, and how these narratives can kind of work their way into our lives. Last week we talked about separation. And each week in the series, we're naming one of these inherited stories that shape us. And then we're opening up to what I want to call the over story, or the counter truth to that narrative. And the over story to last week of separation is the reality that we are all connected to one another, to this earth, and that we couldn't possibly be separated from something that we are connected so deeply to. This week we want to talk about this story of scarcity. Story of scarcity. We had a great conversation in pre-talk as several people shared openly and honestly about the scarcity that they experienced growing up, or in some cases more recently. And most of us, when we think of scarcity, we think of economic or financial scarcity. We think of food insecurity. If anybody has ever experienced a food insecurity, or the financial insecurity of not knowing how you're going to survive or pay your basic bills. When we were younger, my dad worked at Chrysler, and then there was a acquisition by Daimler Chrysler, and for a period of time there, he lost his job. He was laid off work, and he was closer to retirement, and so was struggling to find work. During that time, he got a job at an assembly line working on these small parts, and he had developed arthritis by this point in his life, and so he couldn't keep up with the quota and would sometimes bring these plastic parts home, and then we would help him with that. And during that period of time, both leading up to and immediately after that, there was about 6 months where he was out of work. And our family experienced a scarcity I hadn't known up to that point. That was the first time I'd ever had groceries dropped off on our front step anonymously by somebody who knew that we were struggling at that point. And chances are you may have at some point come from a place where you've experienced that kind of scarcity too. Those stories of scarcities mark us, and they stay with us. But I want to counter that against the over story of abundance. A lot of the quotes and things I'm going to be using this morning come from Robin Wall Kimmerer's book. She wrote a small book called The Serviceberry, Stories of Abundance and Reciprocity in the Natural World. I love that book, especially love how she ties these economic theories of abundance and draws on models from nature to examine these stories of abundance. Speaking of nature, last Sunday we were, when I was getting ready for coming over here, we're still in our RV and we are experiencing the beauty of nature all around us, which is most of the time amazing. Last Sunday, we had our window open because it was nice and cool outside, and we like sleeping cool. And we began to hear outside our window this call. I'm going to play it for you. I want any of you budding birders to tell me if you think you can identify what this was that we heard. And it sounded pretty close to this. This comes from the Merlin app, but this is what... Recognize that call there? And this call, I should mention, went on for about 45 minutes outside our window. That happens to be, okay, any guesses, by the way? There you go, good guess. I was going to bring out my hints here. Yeah, that's a red-tailed hawk, and specifically, it's not just a red-tailed hawk, but it's a juvenile red-tailed hawk. So as I've done a lot when I've been living out there and I hear different things, I'll look them up in Merlin, I'll begin to read into that. And so I'm trying to figure out what's going on with this bird having this conniption fit in this tree outside my window. And I read that even once they can fly and hunt, juveniles or fledglings often keep up that raspy, whiny call. It's partly habit and partly still trying to coax food from their parents. They'll perch in a prominent spot and they'll call for long stretches, even in areas that aren't their natal territory. So as I'm sitting there, I'm hearing this. Chances are, if you're a parent or if you've ever had an animal, you recognize and can translate that, and you know what it's saying, right? Without even having to speak red-tailed hawk. It's a cry of not enough. When we had our kids and they were hungry, there's nothing more pitiful than a child who's crying when it's hungry, right? My wife would say the same thing about me now, and that's probably true. Their call is a call of hunger. It's a cry of not enough. And I find it interesting that there's so much overlap between the world of nature and how we oftentimes act. This hawk is still learning to hunt for itself, to fend for itself. So it's dependent, it's waiting, it's anxious, and it's relentless. And scarcity feels like that, doesn't it? It's the constant background cry of not enough time, not enough money, not enough attention. As Beth talked about, not enough worth. Perhaps you grew up in a household where there wasn't enough love. Whatever that story of scarcity was, chances are that story affected you deeply, and it was hard to shake. Robin Wall Kimmerer says, scarcity is a story that blinds us to what's already there. Abundance is learning to see differently. Because you see, just like that hawk was young, was immature, and was blind to the abundance of nature that surrounded it all around. It was young and immature, and it thought that there wasn't enough. And when it comes to these stories of scarcity, we feel these stories with us all the time. We feel this story a lot when it comes to time, especially. I learned this week that time, the word time, is the most common noun in the English language. Did you know that? I had to look that up just to confirm that, and it's true. The word time is the most common noun in the English language, and yet we feel like we can never get enough of it. We're always talking about it. We're trying to manage it. We'll go to seminars to learn how to optimize it. We'll buy planners and apps, and we'll do everything we can to structure our life. And we'll work so hard and spend thousands of dollars to optimize our time and think nothing about blowing 2 hours scrolling and doom scrolling on social media or any other activity. It's strange, isn't it, how time can feel so scarce when we all have the same abundance of time available to us. I read an article this week that I'm going to include in the email called How Social Media Shortens Your Life. And in that article, there was a quote from Sean Parker, who's Facebook's founding president. And he said, direct quote, the thought process that went into building these applications like Facebook and our social media feeds, was all about How do we consume as much of your time and conscious attention as possible? And they've done a pretty good job of that. If you read this article, How Social Media Shortens Your Life, you'll flirt with deleting some of the social media feeds from your phone. The reality is that we have an abundance of time. We have the same 24 hours in the day, the same 7 days in a week. Judging by the color of hair and the amount of hair, some of you have a little more or less time left than some of us. But we all have this moment, don't we? When we're so busy trying to live from a scarcity of time, it causes us to rush to meet deadlines. It causes us to feel like there's never enough time, never enough opportunity, and we rush and we miss moments that are right under our nose, don't we? And scarcity doesn't just live in our calendars, and it doesn't just live in our bank accounts. It shapes how we see ourselves and how we see each other. So in Charles Eisenstein's book that I quoted from before, this is the book called The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible. He talks a lot about theories of abundance to counter these economic models of scarcity that we've all inherited. He says, from our immersion in scarcity arises the habits of scarcity. From the scarcity of time arises the habit of hurrying. From the scarcity of money arises the habits of greed. From the scarcity of attention comes the habit of showing off. And from the scarcity of meaningful labor comes the habit of laziness. From the scarciness of unconditional acceptance comes the habit of manipulation. This model, this narrative of not enough, is so pernicious because it affects us so deeply. I didn't spend a lot of time growing up thinking about economic models, and I don't do a lot of economic reading in general. Most of that stuff is rather boring to me. However, and I apologize, any economic theorists out there or economic majors? Okay, good. This next illustration will go better then. So from an economic perspective, I guess I hadn't realized until I started, first of all, connecting some of these economic theories that Robin Wall Kimmerer talks about in her book, The Serviceberry, and starting to reflect about the narratives, the stories we inherit, even in terms of economic models. So the American Economic Association definition, this is from their website, about what the study of economics is. It says, the study of economics is the study of scarcity. I kid you not, I had to copy and paste this in there. They say this, it's a study of scarcity, the study of how people use resources and respond to incentives. And it's true, isn't it? We live in a capitalist-driven society where scarcity drives demand, which drives up prices, and it causes certain people to benefit and to accumulate more while others get less and less. And economics, it says, is the study of how these models of scarcity affect people and affect their buying habits. And from a high school economics textbook, it says this, economics is about decision-making in the face of scarcity. I find it interesting, don't you, that baked right into the very models of education that we're coming out of is this notion that scarcity is the default mode that we operate from. That we start from a place of scarcity. There's not enough. And therefore, because there's not enough, it drives accumulation of wealth, of resources, until today we have a society now that looks like it came out of some dystopian novel, where there are oligarchs and certain people so wealthy that their accumulated wealth is more than the GDP of some nations. And they continue to accumulate more and more and more. And of course, that's just economic theory, isn't it? The haves and the have-nots. So how does this affect us? It gets into us. And before long, we find ourselves living from this story of scarcity. And much like that juvenile red-tailed hawk, we're crying out, not enough, not enough, not enough. Not enough time. There's not enough resources available. I don't have enough love, attention, acceptance. Not enough. Meanwhile, we're ignoring the abundance that is all around us. And that's where I want to land this conversation, is by talking about this counter story or this over story of abundance. This foundational truth that we don't have to start the story from a place of scarcity. We can approach from a place of abundance. Robin Wall Kimmerer in the Serviceberry says, recognizing abundance rather than scarcity undermines an economy that thrives by creating unmet desires. Now, I didn't have much background in economic theory, but I did grow up in a marketing background. And Marketing 101 is learning how to convince you that what you have isn't enough, and that what you need that will somehow make you complete, fulfilled, is this thing over here. It's connecting consumers with products or services, and the way you do that is by creating needs, by creating scarcity even. Some of you can remember the scarcity, first of all, the abundance, and then the scarcity, and then finally the abundance again of these little plush collectible Beanie Babies. I think that little craze. Did anybody get into that for a hot minute? Right? You know, the more scarce a Beanie Baby was, the more valuable it became. We're rather funny as human beings, as Homo sapiens, aren't we? In how we play games with ourselves. We'll even tell ourselves stories of scarcity while surrounded by abundance. Recognizing abundance rather than scarcity undermines this economy that thrives by creating unmet desires. Gratitude cultivates an ethic of fullness, but the economy needs emptiness. If anything, choosing to live from a place of abundance and choosing to live from a place of gratitude is very countercultural. It is an act of rebellion in a capitalistic society that tells us that we derive our happiness by the things we accumulate and that there's always something more around the next corner. And to counter that, we choose gratitude. If scarcity is the old story that we inherited, or the story that we grew up with, or the story that was baked into the economy and these theories that we were taught in school, if that's the old story, then the over story is abundance. And the larger, truer story that holds and connects us. So I want to talk about 3 shifts that we can practice this week as we're thinking about moving from this place of scarcity to abundance. First of all, the scarcity of time, moving from this scarcity of time to a presence. We've been engaging with the themes of mindfulness meditations that Carrie's been leading our monthly mindfulness group in. And mindfulness causes you to be extremely present in the right here and now. It's what Ram Dass referred to in his mantra, be here now. It says that we don't have to live from a scarcity of time because we all have this present moment. And whatever is happening in this present moment deserves our entire attention. And something as simple as eating an apple mindfully can place you in such a state of connection with the present moment that before long, these notions of scarcity of time begin to go away. You move from I don't have enough time to saying I have this moment. I have this moment. How am I living this moment? And the abundance is not about more time, more days, more hours. It's about fully inhabiting the days and the hours that we have. That's the difference about living from a place of scarcity with our time to moving to a place of abundance. It's recognizing that we simply have this moment. We're not guaranteed anything else. And this moment is all that there really is. So we move and shift from a scarcity of time to presence, from a scarcity of worth, which Beth talked a little bit about again in her meditation, to enoughness. Scarcity tells us you don't belong. You're not loved or valued for who you are. You don't belong. Your contribution isn't wanted. We, as a spiritual community, exist to create a counter narrative to that says, you are enough. You belong in this community, not by virtue of any beliefs that you have, any prayers that you've prayed, or being dunked, or whatever else. It's a sense of belonging. It's a sense of worth that comes out of your connection to me and to one another, our shared interconnection with all things. You matter. You belong. Scarcity of worth to enoughness. And the last one is from moving from this economic scarcity to, and this is kind of a challenge or a little bit of homework for you, for those of you who want to read Robin Wall Kimmerer's book, The Serviceberry. There's some real interesting ideas in there about gift economies, specifically within indigenous cultures, that are quite fascinating. To look how some of our Native American cultures that were here on this continent before we stole it, how they existed with an economic model that didn't start from a place of scarcity, but it started from a place of sharing. We benefit when we all share together. And in those gift economies, there are economic theorists now who are studying them and finding that it's not just rainbow and puppy dogs and everybody living this happy life together, that these kind of reciprocity-driven economic models can actually work. And we can begin to live that out in our own lives. So what does it look like to give gifts and meaningful gifts that connect, that have stories, moving from this scarcity model to this gift model? What we give away multiplies. So I hope for all of us, no matter what stories we inherited regarding scarcity, whatever that looked like in your life, whatever narrative you picked up growing up, and however that may shape you today. What we talked about in pre-talk is that we realize that there are external factors that affect whether we have scarcity or abundance, and then there's internal drivers as well. You perhaps know the people or a person who might have bank accounts that could survive for decades, and yet they still are anxious and insecure about their retirement accounts and their assets and their accumulations. You can have abundance all around you and still be blind to it if that scarcity narrative is still driving you. So friends, I hope that you choose to live from a place of abundance. May you see abundance where scarcity once told you there was none. May we feel time not as an enemy to outrun or something to conquer, but as a gift, unfolding moment by moment. And may you notice the fullness already present in your breath, your body, your relationships, and this earth. And may you walk beneath the overstory of abundance, rooted in gratitude, sustained by connection, free to give your gifts to the world. Namaste.